министр иностранных дел Российской Федерации Сергей Викторович Лавров и министр иностранных дел Республики Индия Субраманян Джайшанкар подписывают протокол о консультациях между Министерством иностранных дел Республики Индия и Министерством иностранных дел Российской Федерации на 2024-2028 годы. The Minister of External Affairs of the Republic of India, Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Sergey Lavrov, are signing the protocol of consultations between the Ministry of External Affairs of the Republic of India and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation for the period of 2024-2028.
Уважаемые коллеги, сейчас состоится пресс-конференция глав внешнеполитических ведомств России и Индии.
You have the earphone. Уважаемые дамы и господа.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, we have just finished our talks at the level of foreign ministers. The talks were a part of the visit to the Russian Federation of the Minister of External Affairs of the Republic of India, my counterpart and my friend, Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar. Yesterday, the distinguished minister, as the co-chair of the Intergovernmental Commission, also held talks with the Russian co-chair of the Commission, the Deputy Prime Minister of the Russian Federation, Denis Manturov. Today, we have taken notice of the good outcome of those talks. Specific agreements have been reached to deepen our trade and economic and investment links and other areas of cooperation that fall within the competence of the Intergovernmental Commission. Yesterday's talks and our today's meeting confirmed that the relations between Moscow and New Delhi are based on a confidential nature, on mutual respect. They are not subject to any political fluctuations. They truly reflect the character of our partnership, the special privileged strategic partnership, as stated in the documents signed by our leadership. We have spoken out in favor of continued political dialogue, which is required to strengthen our relations on a sustainable basis. We have paid special attention to the matters of building up practical cooperation, in addition to the agreements that had been reached yesterday as part of the session of the Intergovernmental Commission. Today we have agreed upon a number of steps that would allow us to expand cooperation, including in the context of the upcoming launch of the North-South International Transport Corridor, as well as the establishment of the Chennai-Vladivostok route, and the cooperation on the exploration of the Northern Sea route, which is a very promising area. We have also agreed to expand the legal framework of our relationship, in particular to accelerate the adoption of the agreement on the mutual protection of investments and another important multilateral document, namely the upcoming agreement on the free trade area between India and the Eurasian Economic Union. We have also discussed the prospects of military and technical cooperation, including the joint production of modern weaponry. We also have specific steps in this area. Our cooperation is of a strategic nature. Strengthening it corresponds to the national interests of our states, the interests of maintaining security in the Eurasian continent. As mentioned before, we are respectful of the aspiration of our Indian colleagues to diversify their military and technical links. We also understand and we are ready to support their initiatives to produce the military products as part of the Made in India program. We stand ready to cooperate in this area. We have reaffirmed our aspiration to strengthen energy cooperation. This is a strategic area of our relations. We agreed on the expansion of the exports of Russian hydrocarbons to the Indian market, as well as the cooperation on the peaceful use of nuclear energy. First of all, the further implementation of the Kudankulam nuclear power plant project. This is our practical contribution into India's activities and work to satisfy its national needs for clean and safe energy produced in the country. We have a positive outlook of the bilateral cooperation in the area of piloted space programs, as well as rocket engines, the satellite navigation systems. We have also touched upon the regional and international affairs. We have taken note of our multilateral cooperation, first of all, at the United Nations, where Russia, as you know, supports the Indian aspiration to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council, along with the representatives of Latin America and Africa. We touched upon the cooperation within the SCO and BRICS, where Russia is assuming chairmanship starting from the 1st of January next year. We are sincerely grateful to our Indian colleagues for their aspiration to take a responsible approach towards the regional and global issues, based upon primarily their national interests, the interests of equal and fair international cooperation. This approach is characteristic of the Indian approach to the processes taking place in and around Ukraine. We also discussed this matter today, as well as other regional issues, including the situation in the Asia-Pacific region, in the context of the current processes taking place there in parallel, or rather despite the agreements that had previously been reached within ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. We discussed the situation in Afghanistan. Overall, we have a shared interest here in our large Eurasian continent and in the surrounding waters. It is important to seek solutions that would reflect the balance of interests, that would not provoke any confrontational approaches, which are sometimes brought to the region from the outside. I am most grateful to my colleague and friend for these talks, and I am glad to give him the floor.
Thank you very much. Friends from the media, let me first of all thank Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov for a warm welcome, for his hospitality. As he shared with you, we've had a very good session of talks. We will be carrying on after this. And I think today what clearly came out was that India-Russia relations remain very steady, remain very strong. They are based on our strategic convergence, on our geopolitical interests, and because they are mutually beneficial. We spent a lot of time discussing political cooperation with regard to various international issues, including international organizations, BRICS, of which Russia will be the president, SCO, etc. With regard to our bilateral relations, bilateral cooperation, yesterday I also had a meeting with the co-chair of the India-Russia Intergovernmental Commission, Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov. And today, actually, we appreciated the fact that our trade is at an all-time high. We have crossed $50 billion turnover last year. We expect to exceed that this year. And what is important is that this trade is more balanced, it is sustainable, and it provides for fair market access. I think that was very much part of my discussions yesterday and a little bit today with Minister Lavrov as well. Moving on from that, I would say we had today and yesterday discussed our cooperation in relationship to the Far East, Russian Far East. We expect a delegation from the Far East to participate in an important conference in India next month. We discussed long-term arrangements. We are today in our trade, energy, fertilizers, coking coal are very big components of that. How do we reach long-term arrangements in that regard was a big part of our discussion. We discussed mutual investments, the need to progress on a bilateral investment treaty. We spoke about railways yesterday, about industrial zone infrastructure, and we have agreed that the negotiations between India and the Eurasian Economic Union for a free trade agreement will be resumed in the second half of January this year. On energy, as I mentioned, we have today a very substantial relationship, both in terms of Indian investments in Russia, in oil and gas, which we are seeking to expand, as also in nuclear. Yesterday we signed two important amendments which will take the Kudankulam nuclear power project forward. We also spoke about connectivity from Western India through the International North-South Transport Corridor, also connectivity from Eastern India, from Chennai to Vladivostok, and the polar route. We discussed various related areas where India's polar capabilities could be enhanced in collaboration with Russia. On civil aviation and tourism was also a subject of discussion. We would like to see more Russian tourists in India. We have increased the number of flights from India every week from 52 to 64. We are open to increasing it further. We also, of course, discussed the global strategic situation, spoke about Ukraine, about Gaza, about the Indo-Pacific, about ASEAN, Afghanistan, and as I said, about UN-related matters. It's been a very, very good discussion. Minister Lavrov and I have met regularly in the course of this year. I think that's a very natural interaction between two countries which have such a strong and close history of cooperation. So once again, it's really been a pleasure today to be back, to sit down and discuss with you our shared concerns. And as always, as in the past, I think this has been very helpful. Thank you.
To the question, please, the Sputnik agency. Hello. Christina Maloy, the special correspondent of Sputnik. The first question for Minister Lavrov. The presidential assistant Maxim Oreshkin this week said that there is a growing insustainability of the economies of the global north and the offensive of the global east and south. One of the most promising projects for the communication and connectivity is the north-south transport corridor. In the context of the growing Western pressure and the sanctions, can we expect that this project would get a second breath? Thank you very much. When Presidential Assistant Maxim Oreshkin stated his view, he was using the statistics that show that there is a certain trend for the rebalancing of the strength in the global politics and economy and finance. And this process results in the increased share of the countries of the global south and the global east, and the reduction of the share of the global north. Traditionally, the north has been associated with the G7 and its closest allies. This is the objective statistical data. The trend will get even stronger as BRICS group is expanding. The overall GDP of BRICS, of the expanded BRICS, would significantly be over the figures shown by the G7. As mentioned before, this is a natural process in the global economy. It is due to the numerous mistakes and the unacceptable methods that are used by the United States and its allies to hold back the objective flow of history. Today, we said that we share positions with India. We do not accept the distortion of the principles of international law, as well as the free market principles, fair competition, and the non-acceptance of the violation of the principles that are the foundation for the globalization system promoted by the West. The West didn't take second chances. It had no doubts about destroying the entire system that they had built before. They could easily let go of the previous mechanisms that were supposedly serving the interests of the entire humanity. Of course, the trust for the West has been disrupted. That is why today we have even more reasons to trust the role of the global majority in the global economic development. The development should be based on mutual benefits rather than someone's expenses. We have discussed the North-South transport corridor, the Chennai-Vladivostok route, the policy route. Speaking of the North-South corridor, I don't think it needs a second breath. It has already been revitalized, and this project attracts an active interest from all the countries involved, and it will definitely be implemented soon. Thank you.
Mr. Jaishankar, I would like to ask in English if you don't mind. So,
I don't mind.
Thank you. Explaining India's relationship with Russia earlier this month, you mentioned that the issue is often defined in a way as though there is a handicap for India because of its ties with Russia. Indeed, Western politicians often call Russia diminished and isolated and openly pressure other countries not to trade with Moscow. Why do you think India benefits from its relationship with Russia despite the West's negative reaction? Thank you.
I think I must have been reacting to the manner in which I was asked that particular question. And I know that is not your intent. So let me say, for us, Russia is a very valued partner. It's a very time-tested partner. It's a relationship from which both India and Russia have benefited enormously. And my presence here today and the fact, all the developments that I have pointed out, including our growing trade, investments, our military technical cooperation, our connectivity projects, I think all of this will give you a good sense of really the importance and the value that we attach to the relationship. But I would also, briefly like to comment on your first question, even though it was addressed to Minister Lavrov, which is the international North-South transport corridor. It is in our interest, and not just in our interest, I think in the interest of the global economy, that this corridor progresses, and we certainly will give it the highest priority. You are right when you speak about a rebalancing world. I give you the example of India itself. Today we are moving to be a $4 trillion economy. And if we are growing at 7.7% this year, a possibility of improved growth in the future, we do think the world is not what it was. Politics will have to change, the global order will have to change, international economy will have to change. And we appreciate very much that Russia is today a strong votary of a multipolar order, also that it is supportive of a lot of positions that we take in our mutual interest in international politics. Thank you.
Thank you.
Телеканал RT.
RT TV channel.
I have questions for both. I'll start with Mr. Lavrov first. Sergey Viktorovich,
Minister Lavrov, India is a country that talks to everyone as equals, both to the Golden Billion and to the Global South, as reflected in the New Delhi communique following the G20 summit. How important is this policy for Russia? I believe that this policy is not just important for Russia and all the other countries of the world. This is the only responsible policy that can ensure respect, the reputation and benefits for a country. In the cooperation with all the country, this is a policy that reflects the main demands and the main principles of the UN Charter, which talks about the respect for the sovereign equality of states. India is one of the vivid examples of this principle. Russia, too, has always been moving in its policies without attempts to punish anyone or to be unobjective to anyone. These are not our principles. This is rather what we see from a different group of countries, including the countries of the Golden Billion, as you called them. You have mentioned the G20 summit in New Delhi that took place last year. This was truly a triumph for the Indian foreign policy, a triumph for multilateral diplomacy. And it was possible primarily due to the chairmanship of the G20. The G20 didn't allow the final communiqué to be one-sided. The final communiqué reflects the balance of interests. This is an example of how the G20 and other groups should be working. And by the way, this includes the United Nations and the Security Council. As mentioned before, we support India's candidacy to join the ranks of the permanent members of the Security Council.
Jaishankar, a lot has been said about the special chemistry between Prime Minister Modi and President Vladimir Putin, especially during their annual meetings. Now, the question is, will we see a resumption of bilateral annual meetings between India and Russia? And how important are personal interactions, physical interactions between our two countries' leaders annually? Thank you.
The tradition of annual meetings between our leaders is something that we value very greatly. And as someone who's seen it over the last decade, I can attest to its enormous value. I think my colleague has seen it for longer and could probably confirm what I'm saying. I don't think it's so much an issue of resumption of these summits. This year, because of our G20 presidency and end of the year, we had certain preoccupations. It so happened this year that it could not be held. But I'm very confident that we will see an annual summit next year. Again, ours is really a relationship which at every level, starting with the strong relationship between the leaders to right down to the popular level, the societal sentiment. I think we have really very positive feelings for each other. And I think that's a really big source of strength for the relationship.
Thank you.
И завершающий вопрос.
And the final question from the Lenta.ru agency. A question for Minister Lavrov. Good afternoon. As mentioned today, you were talking about the Ukrainian issues. Could you share the Moscow's opinions on the Kiev infighting between the military and the political leadership of Ukraine? Also, how could you comment on the leaks in the American media on the Western intentions to freeze the conflict in Ukraine and present it as a winner? Speaking of the infighting in Kiev between the various authorities, the military command, I cannot make any comments. This is the internal affair of the country. A country that has lost its independence and has fallen under external control. It is up to those who control the country to take care of this. Speaking of the leaks on the Western intentions to freeze the conflict in Ukraine and present Ukraine as the winner country. Sure, we have seen those leaks and we are aware of the Western and the United States capacity to declare victories. We know how they won in Vietnam, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, when in 2003 the United States invaded the country under a false pretext, and a month later they declared the victory of democracy. So, 20 years have passed. Where is Iraq now? As well as Libya. It has also become a subject of a special concern of NATO countries, who was supposedly bringing democracy and thereby destroying the statehood. None of the countries used by the United States to promote its own interest far from their shores have become better. Take a look at the Middle East. Take a look at what is happening in the Gaza Strip. Under the conditions of Washington's blockade, for many years they've been blocking any efforts to establish a Palestinian state in accordance with the decisions of the United Nations Security Council. And staying on the American topic, very close to the US borders there is one of the poorest countries called Haiti. The United States have been working with it for over 100 years. It's not the first time the Americans would proclaim a fabricated victory. Thank you. The conference is over.